it's not actually a feeling in the moment. It's a feeling of impending doom. Like, this will be bad. That's almost worse than the feeling itself of judgment, or it's the build-up, isn't it?
As a self-employed person, you have 8 bosses, and none of them care what the other boss wants.
And he was smiling at me, and I was like, eventually, like, why are you smiling? And he said, because I choreographed that. And I was like, oh my goodness.
And all the comments were like, I could tell she's British. Have you heard of a toothbrush? And like, yeah, maybe they weren't like the perfect Hollywood kind of teeth. But it was literally like people were competing to like have the funniest one.
Well, essentially they found that the more you know, the less you feel you know.
This dude who was significantly shorter than Philippe just like cheekily went in front of him, and Philippe went, ugh, and picked him up and spun round and plonked him down. I feel like an imposter. Help.
Rescue me from the pits of imposter syndrome. Do you get imposter syndrome?
Yes.
Or do you ever feel like an imposter? Like they've mistakenly let you in to do what you do?
I used to, not as much anymore.
Really?
But I do sometimes. Depends on the job. I did an editing job a few days ago, and I sat in a gallery. And a gallery, if people don't know, is where they have all the screens and you can like see all the bits. And I was in the
It's like the brain.
It's like the brain of any event or production or whatever is a thing called the gallery. And you sit there and you watch the screens and stuff like in the movies. And I had to edit highlights of rugby. And I've edited loads before, but I've never edited like in that kind of live event space. And people were like looking at me, asking me questions. And I thought, I don't know the answer to any of this stuff. And someone said to me, can we get cam 1 on the go? Cam 1 on the go. Can we get that back up to the feed? And I went, yeah, probably. Yeah.
Be like that meme of the cat that's just kind of smashing the keys.
But that was fun.
That would be me.
So I do get imposter syndrome sometimes.
Yeah.
But I try to mitigate that the best. But I'm quite lucky that because I've done public speaking stuff, I can look back at my, portfolio. I can look back at my portfolio.
My catalogue, my back catalogue of work.
That sounds so like arrogant. I can look back at the things I've done and realise I've done this.
This is your life.
Exactly.
You just have your own version at home.
That sounds really like kind of, oh yeah, my catalogue. So yeah, a yes and no, but it depends on the job, I would say. It depends on the stakes.
What does it feel like? That's what I'm interested in. It's like, when do we decide I'm in the wrong place here? Like what's that, or like when that switch is flipped, how does it feel in your body?
I think I spoke with a business coach last year about this called Rob, and he said, and I think this is true, I think I've got a lot of confidence. I'm really quite confident, but it doesn't take loads to knock it. So imposter syndrome for me is if I'm doing something and it's going fine, but if I do a mistake and in my mind someone says to me, they don't normally say this, where they go, have you done this before? That imagination of someone going,
that's made my guts
you haven't done this much, have you? Or you're quite new to this? Those kind of voices that no one often says, or they may say it but behind closed doors or whatever. That's what I get worried or scared about.
That is a horrible feeling, isn't it? Of like that feeling of being found out. I feel like it's kind of similar to when, well, I don't know if you were like this, but I didn't do great at school. So it was almost the exact same feeling for me as like being called out in class and not really having listened to my teacher and being like, oh crap, I got to come up with an answer. And I wasn't listening. Or like, where's your homework? All that sort of thing. And normally I'm like, Miss always forgets. So I'll just ride that wave for a while. And then the day where Miss didn't forget or whatever, it's like that finding out, isn't it? That like judgment, that gut churn.
Do you try to hide? You know, in the school when that happens and you know the teacher's going, Johnny, homework, Charlotte, you kind of go, oh, me? Oh, what?
It was a long time ago. But yeah, I do feel like that was the start of my improv career. As I knew it was like, think on the spot, go. But yeah, it is a really horrible feeling because it's actually like, I think it's it's not actually a feeling in the moment. It's a feeling of impending doom.
Mm.
Like, this will be bad. That's almost worse than the feeling itself of judgment, or it's the build-up, isn't it? Of like, I'm going to be found out. They're going to think I'm an imposter. They're going to ridicule me. They're going to ask me a question that I won't know the answer to. So it's almost like that anticipation, isn't it? But yeah, physiologically, yeah, the want to hide, the want for the ground to swallow me up, the guts churning, the mind blanking, that kind of what is it? There's hyper and hypo arousal, I think. Don't quote me on that. But I found that really useful when I learned that there was the type of arousal where you're firing on all cylinders and you're really starting to oh yeah, like the thoughts are coming thick and fast and you're really kind of nailing the scenario. And then there's the opposite of that where you retreat. It's almost like predator and prey, isn't it? And the retreating is where you go into that like shutdown. I can't think of anything to say. My body is kind of, left, is detached from my mind. And I don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
That's the more scary feeling, I think, that version.
Of like my body's physiologically is going to shut down.
Of they're like between the hyper and hypo, if I've got those terms right. They're on the ball or off it and I need to just hide. Yeah. I guess it's the difference between like fight or flight, isn't it?
Or freeze.
Fight is or freeze. Yeah, exactly. It's like similar to those. That for me is quite debilitating?
Debilitating?
Deribonilitating?
It is it that?
Dilapidating. Sometimes this is dyspraxia. Okay, so I have dyspraxia. I'm going to blame it on this.
I've got that.
Where
I haven't got an excuse.
Sometimes the words are just strong and wrong. And I'm just, don't know if that's right. And people will be listening to this right now going, it's debilitating. Debilitating!
I just said that.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
I totally ignored you.
It's okay. But it's a horrible feeling though. And it's also
horrible.
The feeling of like, I could lose my job, I'm a fraud, I'm not good enough.
Mistakes.
But I would say no matter how big or famous or successful you are at public speaking, people always will make mistakes and there's going to be those doubts. A weird example is when John Travolta announced at the Oscars where I can't Idina Menzel,
yes, well done.
And he went, the wickedly talented, like wickedly talented Delta-zine. And it's like, that's not what it said. But I think I heard the story with this. Apparently, he was given that name off stage, and I think he was distracted.
I think he knows Idina Menzel.
Does he?
Yeah. So and then something funny came up, or he couldn't quite read the teleprompter.
He was given it beforehand, like as he was going on.
Sorry. So there's a lot of pressure getting that name right because they're a winner anyway, right?
It's the winner anyway. But I think what probably happens is like as he was going on, he was given the name, and that. In that moment, like you said about the physiological stuff, sometimes you get in a state where like you can't even like see, think, hear. Your senses just kind of go off the rails a little bit.
Yeah, there's a lot going on at the Oscars.
I remember when I had something similar happen to me. I'm not sure if I've mentioned this before. When I did the 100 stuff, and we had to do rehearsals, and we had to like then go straight into it, and I didn't have time to prepare or rehearse, and I could feel like all your kind of body just starts to kind of weirdly shut down. Another example was when I remember when I first did, when I first interviewed the now First Minister of Wales, Vaughan Gething. So I was doing, I was going to work for Capital Radio at one point. So I was supposed to do some news reading. So do you know, it's like, I don't know, top stories today on Capital. Charlotte Lewis is drinking from a red cup, like that kind of style newsreader. And I was interviewing the now First Minister of Wales, Vaughan Gething. And I said to him, Mr. Gething, do I have your permission to use this for the radio? I didn't even say the station. I didn't say what it was for. I just kind of went for the radio. And he kind of went, yeah, okay. And I could see he was locked in. He knew exactly what he was going to say. He had a script there ready for him.
They are.
And I was just like, and I can't remember anything of what I said. I listened back to the recording later on, like an hour later. And I wasn't even that nervous. I think it was all new to me. Maybe imposter syndrome.
Was it during COVID?
2 weeks before lockdown. It was because I hadn't done any radio. It was a new medium. I'd been so used to TV presenting that radio all of a sudden felt a bit like, oh, hang on, this is a different...
I have different things to think about.
This is going to sound like a weird thing to put in as well, but I'd held the like local TV microphone for so long with that branding and that
Yeah,
idea, and all of a sudden I was holding a Capital microphone. And I know that
Oh,
sounds like a weird thing to think about, but
no,
it was like a
that's
new
interesting.
thing. Despite it being something I've done loads of times before, the stakes felt higher, and I therefore felt a bit like, do I
Yeah.
belong here?
Th-
Should I be doing this?
This is really interesting, actually. I love this because we speak all the time. And then as soon as a camera is in front of our face, suddenly it comes with all of that baggage of like how I should look on camera, or when I hold a mic, suddenly all this is an amplification tool, isn't it? And it's the same with a camera. It just amplifies you out to more people, or it just contains that image. But suddenly we just cut like ourselves off from the fact that we're just talking to people, and it becomes non-conversational. It becomes really scripted. It becomes, you know, we're striving for perfection because that's what we've seen in like films or TV or whatever. Whereas actually what's interesting now is we can sort of shed all of those ideas a little bit. So when of being perfect, of being like a celebrity, of being, absolutely squeaky clean perfect, because people do want to see the more, and I hate this has become such a buzzword, but the authentic version of you. So it's interesting that we're being put in environments and feeling like an imposter, but that environment is actually wanting you to look like you belong, like you're yourself.
Mm.
It's interesting.
Do you think as well that feeling a bit like an imposter, uh, depends on the extent of it, is actually a good thing because it's a sign that you are growing? It's growing pains. It's all to do with feeling uncomfortable. If
Yeah.
you, okay, this is another example where, and you did probably have this too because we're both freelancers. I work with four different people, like a lot. Like this weekend, I worked for four different people, like Principality Stadium, the Scarlets, an editing gig for TikTok, and then I did a big videography job for the museum. So I worked for four different types of people over the weekend, yeah. And my mate James Thomas told me this, who's an actor. And people say when you're self-employed, oh, you don't have a boss. You can do. You're your own boss. You don't have to worry about bosses. And he said, no, 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 no. As a self-employed person, you have 8 bosses, and
Yeah.
none of them care what the other boss wants. And I went,
Oh, that's a really good way of
but
putting
he
it.
got that from Daniel Glynn, by the way. And I kind of think, oh, yeah, because you're going into these new environments all the
All the
time.
time.
You're seeing new clients. I know a lot of people see new people all the time, but you're kind of going into these new environments. You're kind of always gearing yourself up to potentially feel like an imposter. And I don't know if it ever kind of goes away because every time I go to a new space, it's almost like learning the rules of that game
Yeah.
or that
But
board.
then for people who aren't going to different, having 8 different bosses, they have the same ones. There's something really interesting there about imposter syndrome, or, that feeling, because you might be doing something different in front of colleagues that know you really well. And so it's almost harder to try on some new things. You've got more stakes, haven't you? When it comes to doing a presentation for the first time, they're like, oh, we haven't seen Karen in this way before. And so you're mentally preparing yourself for that feeling of shift in your colleagues or your boss or whatever. Or it can come with stakes. Like, if I do more of this stuff, if I do more speaking at work, perhaps I can get a different job title, or perhaps I can ask for more money, or all of those sorts of things. So it definitely belongs in both of those camps, doesn't it? Whether you're a freelancer or someone who's worked at the same company for many years. I did a workshop a little while ago, actually, a corporate workshop, and I'm really passionate about everyone being involved. And someone came along who was the receptionist and was taking notes and things like that. Amazing administrator. And there was an exercise that I did, and she sort of took herself off to the side. And I went, no, you're going to be joining in this. And she was like, no, this isn't for me. I'm not part of this. And I was like, yeah, you absolutely are. So anyway, she did the exercise, and she was in a room with the CEO or the CFOs. There's like the senior title holders. And she really committed to that exercise and did exceptionally well. And for it wasn't definitely the first time they had seen her in that light, but there was a shift that happened in the room that went, wow, that individual is really capable of this. And so it also, even though you're thrown in the deep end, in that kind of, might feel like an imposter in that room, you have the capacity to almost look like the person who really belongs in that space, because actually some of the other people found the exercise challenging. She found it really not easy, but she really nailed it. So it's quite a good opportunity actually to put you in a different environment and see how you fare. It could be a really cool, and I remember them all kind of looking at her going, oh, we haven't seen you in that light before.
Yeah.
So I wonder what their path was after that. Who knows? But yeah, sometimes you have to get thrown in the deep end to see how you fare.
I saw that happen to someone a few days ago, actually. So when I was doing the Principality Stadium, so there's a thing called the Road to the Principality or Road to Principality, and loads of local teams from different leagues and cups come to the Principality Stadium, and it's the big moment of glory to play in the most famous stadium in Wales. Yeah, and this was the mixed ability. I think it was a mixed ability final. So we had people who had a combination of physical and also invisible disabilities playing rugby against each other. And there's one really nice moment of, I guess, inclusion where they brought on this young lad who had Down syndrome, and they passed him the ball, and they made it safe for him to go and score a try under the posts. And you could see he was the happiest person I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
So I was doing the highlights, so I made sure that was in, that angles were all good for him and all that kind of thing. And yeah, that was a really nice moment, that this is the most prestigious stadium, one of the most prestigious stadiums in the world. And there's that lad who maybe would never have thought that he would ever be scoring a try under the posts of that stadium that has won, Grand Slams have been won there. So that was a really nice moment of so I think sometimes we think that the world is geared to make us feel different and othered. But I think we're all trying to, work our way through this life together, really.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we think the world is meaner than what it actually is sometimes. There are a lot of mean people out there, I think, especially with the rise of social media and people commenting. I'm not sure if you've noticed this. This is kind of relevant to imposter syndrome. But I've noticed, especially on things like TikTok, where all of a sudden people are now competing to get the funniest comment, regardless of if it hurts the person's feelings. So, for example, there's a woman who was talking about something, I can't remember what she was speaking about, and her teeth looked a particular way, and all the comments were I could tell she's British. Have you heard of a toothbrush? And maybe they weren't the perfect Hollywood kind of teeth. But it was literally
That's
people were
awful.
competing to have the funniest one. And what was maybe more disturbing is that the top comment had hundreds, if not thousands of likes. So people going, ha 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 ha. And I just think that, I know you're putting yourself out there to be visible to the world on social media, and that comes as part of the whole experience of it, that you should maybe be willing to accept whatever comes your way. But I think it's almost turned into a game of how can we take the mick out of this person, regardless of they're a human being as well. And I think there's that disconnect sometimes.
Do you think that means that people are less likely to get out of their comfort zone because of things we talked about this in another episode with the kind of anger towards Molly May, and the fact that it was so fast and furious that I just kept thinking, do you know all the things that we think in our head, when we have imposter syndrome, where we're thinking, oh God, people are going to think I'm awful and people are going to judge me and think of this and whatever. They're kind of showcasing to you, yeah, that will happen. And I think that's awful. We would never do this to people in the street. And it's actually, I actually really worry about how we're conditioning language like that, because it's in a space where there's no repercussions. We don't have anything energetically coming back to us. If we said that to someone in the street, we would see, hear, feel a response. And so we wouldn't do it again because we'd feel shame, or we'd feel, oh, actually, that didn't feel good. But when it's online, there's no repercussions. So I do worry about how we're kind of embroiling those growth zones or stretch zones with judgment like that, because it just makes me feel, if I hadn't put myself out there now on social media and just thought, oh, stuff it, I'm going to do it, and gone through, you know, battling demons to do so and whatever, to think, well, you know, I'd really like to work with people and help them have the same sort of process. I don't know if I'd be able to do it as a young person now. I think it almost like this ups the stakes, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. At the same time, and I don't know if this is a good or a bad thing, I don't think that we are able to comprehend the numbers that we see online either. So say we put something up and it gets 1,000 likes. I don't think we can actually comprehend, say 100,000 likes even. Like, I don't know if we can comprehend what that looks like.
I don't think it's about the likes though. I think I'm talking about the comments.
Regardless of, like, say you had, I think the comments, okay, likes is different because that just shows as a number. Comments, whereas if you have hundreds of comments, you can almost see each individual person. But what I mean is, like, say if there was a comment that was particularly nasty and 1,000 people liked it, I don't think we can comprehend what that means. But I don't know.
I still think that we work with scale, and I just think it kind of decorates the stretch zone in a very troubling way, I think. And just to think about, if you're feeling that way, if you're feeling like, oh gosh, those comments are going to be aimed at me, you can put things in place, I think, on things like social media, because imposter syndrome, I think, is really rife on social media. People think, oh, I don't want to be like one of those influencers or whatever. Park all of that. Don't aim to be like an influencer or a TikToker or whatever. It's about, if you have value and you want to share it with someone and you think it would be of value to someone else, do it because of that. And it's easy to say stuff what other people say, but if there's a way that you can mitigate some of the comments, you can turn comments off, you can hide the likes. I don't have any idea how many people like it, because I that's not of interest to me. What's interesting is when people engage. And actually, slowly but surely, the judgment will be outweighed by the people who connect with you and who go, oh, I really needed to hear this today. Or I had that thing that you said in my head the other day. And like, you just never know who's watching, do you? So if you do feel like an imposter online, especially, just think about, what are all the things that you think about social media? Like, everyone's going to be like this. Everyone's going to judge me harshly. Everyone's going to comment, blah, blah, blah. Just inquire as to whether that's actually the truth. Because there are some amazing people online. Have you seen, there's a guy who is a lobster fisherman, and he's on YouTube, and I got introduced to him by Ben, our friend Ben, and he just talks about lobsters, and he's got millions of views, and I just thought, this is the most wonderful thing ever. Like, and I just thought, what if he never decided to do that YouTube channel?
Yeah.
And if there's someone who, like, I was talking to a client who works in forestry, and I was like, you could be the next lobster guy. Like, because it's often the stuff that we go, oh, no one want to hear about that. It's boring. Like, I need to be talking about something exciting or whatever, that people stop themselves kind of putting that stuff out there. And that is so interesting to some people. I think when, like, again, this links to imposter syndrome, is we think we have to be more than who we are to be, like, more interesting. And actually, like, my God, when he was talking to me about trees, I was fascinated. I was absolutely fascinated. I was like, more people need to know about this.
Yeah, exactly. if you break it down as well as to what imposter syndrome or what imposter means, you're an imposter compared to who? And like, when does one feel a sense of belonging, or when is one belonging in that group or tribe? Is it? And are we always looking to the next person up? So say, like, I would never compare myself in terms of imposter syndrome to someone who maybe is less experienced than me, but I would only compare myself in that way to someone who's more experienced than me. But do they compare themselves to the next higher up, and the next higher up, and the next higher up, and the next higher up? So do we ever even shed that feeling of feeling like an imposter? I wonder where it probably comes from. It probably comes from, again, tribal kind of societies where we felt like we had to be useful to the group, to have some kind of form of value, to have some form of safety.
Safety,
It's also being found out. That feels quite scary, quite vulnerable. Are you going to be extradited from the tribe? Are you seen as someone who who is worthy?
Like a bit of your conscience as well, I think, of like not masquerading. I think if you feel like an imposter, you're definitely taking your honesty seriously as well.
Yeah.
Because you're thinking, I don't want to lie to anyone.
Yeah.
I don't want them to be duped.
Yeah, because the opposite is arrogance, maybe.
Yes,
some people
okay.
feel like, I belong here, I should be here, I should be in this position. They go, mate, I don't think you're ready for this.
I've actually got a story like that. As you said that, it popped into my head and I thought, oh my goodness, that was a real hilarious time. But I had to be strong and wrong in this. So I worked for around a year at the Manchester Royal Exchange Theatre. And I remember going into rehearsals. I think it was like the first week, and meeting the movement director, Eddie Kay, who's super talented, and he's just super down to earth. I had no idea what his past CV was or anything. And I was talking to him one day over lunch, and I was like, oh, do you know what? I really love the choreography of, like, I'm not a dancer, but I really love the choreography of DV8. They're an amazing company of modern dancers.
What's DV8?
DV8. D, letter D,
the boy band,
letter V, and 8 numerics. No, they're not. They're that I just said. They're a contemporary dance group, and they do really incredible boy NSYNC. And they do amazing dance pieces that really challenge the status quo. So there was there was one that I went to see when I was younger, and it's called To Be Straight With You. And it was about homosexuality, like around the globe, and different politics and yada, yada, yada. It gets you really thinking, really passionate, really moved. And so I followed their work and I thought they were incredible. So over lunch one day, I tell Eddie how incredible DVA is. And he lets me go on for about an hour, probably, just like fangirling. And I was like, there's this piece of movement that's incredible. It's with a ballerina and a man who has a disability, and this, that, and the other, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like rabbiting on, and he was smiling at me. And I was like, eventually, like, why are you smiling? And he said, because I choreographed that. And I was like, oh my goodness. I was like, fangirl. But that whole huge story is to tell you that then, throughout that process, Eddie made me deputy movement captain. I can't move. I have zero dance experience.
Did you just make up a job title? What was that? Deputy
movement director.
Okay.
So I was assistant director throughout the thing anyway. And he was like, oh, when I'm not here, I'm going away for a week, so you're going to do all the choreo. I was like, you've just told me you're the captain of dance. He's like worked with like Frantic Assembly, which is huge, who did like a Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, and like, oh my goodness. So I was there and I was just like, are you kidding? So there's me being like a dance captain.
Yeah.
And I was like, 5, 6, 7, 8.
You were the deputy.
It was like that bit where Joey from Friends says he has like 8 years of like dance experience.
Oh, I don't know if I've seen that one.
And he's just just makes it up. And I was actually mortified. But that was where I was the biggest imposter. And I actually just thought, do you know what? For this, and bless the actors, I just have to be someone that can help them, because, and it's not about me. It's not about how good I am in this. It's, I just have to be switched on and go, right, I'm going to put everything into remembering those moves, into trying to help the performers. And even though I feel like an imposter, I could have just shied away and gone, mate, this is not for me. But I just stood up. And actually, I probably remember some of the warm-up now, because I went home, I practiced it all weekend. Really lame, but I didn't want to be found out. But equally, I just wanted to serve that room really well. But that's probably peak imposter syndrome for me, was Dance captain.
But
Deputy dance captain.
you were a deputy, you work in the Wild West. That's what it sounds like to me.
Oh,
deputy.
I didn't even think
That's
about
what my
that.
mind instantly went to. You were a deputy when you said
I
that.
didn't think of that.
Or schools. But imposter syndrome, it can, I think also owning that you feel a bit like an imposter is quite a fun thing. Some people do roll with it though. What was the name of that guy who went into the BBC for an interview?
Well, this is who I felt like.
Guy. His name is Guy Gomer, I think his name is. I got it.
Guy Gomer, yes.
And this gentleman, shall I tell the story quick? Or do you want to tell it?
No, you can tell it if you want, because we both thought of this when it comes to.
Am I stealing your story?
He's an imposter. It was my story all along.
I'll do it because you just had a lovely story about being a deputy in the Wild West. So there was a gentleman who went to the BBC, and everyone knows this story. His name was Guy Gomer, and he was supposed to do an interview for a job. He was an unemployed gentleman who worked in tech in some shape or form. And he rocked up to the BBC, and the BBC were also supposed to interview another guy called Guy, who was this big wig owner of this certain publication or this tech publication online or something.
Tech company.
So he'd obviously rocked up and said, "Hi, I'm Guy. I'm here for the tech interview." They then trolley him to the news studio, sit him down.
It is a perfect storm.
And on live TV, they go, "So you're the editor of this publication. What do you think of the latest proposal or whatever?" And he just kind of looks
His
around
face.
and isn't sure. And he kind of just rolls with it. And he says, he says something like, "I wasn't expecting this question to come to me." And he just kind of goes with it. Instead of going, "I'm terribly sorry, you have the wrong guy," in true form.
Yeah.
He just kind of runs with it. So he probably felt like an imposter.
He was trying to be polite.
Don't worry about it. So that's quite a funny moment where, even though he felt like an imposter, he just kind of rolled with the punches and saw what happened.
Look what came out of it. He had loads of interviews afterwards. I hope he got a job afterwards, because he didn't obviously go to his interview. But hopefully it stood him in good stead. And it is a funny story.
I wonder what he's doing now. Spy.
I know. I kind of wonder what he's doing now.
Spy, MI5.
But it was just his face. Right? He was just absolutely gobsmacked. It was really funny. I also thought about the guy who, now I don't know if I've got this right, but he pretended to be an interpreter for, was it Nelson Mandela?
Yes.
And just made up sign language.
Yeah.
And I remember that story coming out and being like, what, how did people not catch on? But they must have been thinking, well, perhaps this is a different dialect. BSL, ASL are different. Maybe there's something else, who knows? But my goodness, that was another one that was just funny.
Yeah, and you can always make jokes about it. I think making light of it sometimes is quite a fun thing because we all have it at some point or other in our lives. Maybe when it's getting too much that it becomes a problem. John Redwood was another one. So he was a politician.
I'd never seen this before.
Was in the Welsh National Assembly. I think this was in the 90s. And they were singing My Hen Wlad Fy Nhadau, the Welsh national anthem. And he just stood up with everyone and sang. And he obviously didn't know any of the words.
He'd been recently... became the minister, right?
I need to check. Give me a sec. Oh, this was 1993, the year I was born. I'll show the video as well because, why not? Welsh Secretary John Redwood at a party conference. That's all the information I have. And this is what it looks like.
Just for a second, imagine you're the new Welsh secretary at a televised party conference. And to your horror, you're required to sing along to your adopted national
I love
anthem.
Zoe Ball.
You haven't had time to learn the words. Never mind. Surely you could just
Is that
wing
Zoe
it
Ball?
somehow.
Yeah.
Dunno. That was like me in school because I never learnt my lines for the songs. I was in the school choir. And, by the way, I can say this. My mate Owen Morgan was in the school choir, but they told him to stop singing because he was flat.
See, this is where the imposter syndrome gets. What's the way it carries on because he was flat. No, that's what people are worried about.
I know. I'm not saying it's a good thing. Bless. He doesn't sing now, believe it or not. He works in finance.
Yeah. I'm not surprised.
But John Redwood. But this is my theory. Okay, this is what. I'm not saying, okay.
Do you know what? I'll just dig into the imposter syndrome.
No. I'm not, because he was trying to wing it, and I actually respect the kind of winging it. Another tactic, if you don't know your lines and singing, just close your eyes and imagine his passion. That's another one. I've seen players do that a lot.
What, just
Yeah. Close your eyes and just like,
Or just pretend to cry.
oh, that's a good one.
Or like, it's just stupid. I couldn't possibly.
That's a good one.
That's, yeah. You couldn't do that during karaoke.
I do. I just get the crowd to sing.
That is a really good tactic.
Join in.
Everybody!
You know the words, and then
You
give it to
know the
someone.
words.
I always do it. I always do it. I always do it as well when I always do Bohemian Rhapsody, not always, sometimes. And you know when they go for me and it goes really high, I either stop singing or I go ee, and move the mic away from me so no one can hear it, or I get them to do it. So it's all smoke and mirrors. And basically,
See, even the karaoke
a
you
fake.
rehearsing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, do you know, I was interested in, so we're talking about like imposter syndrome and like how much you belong and all of that world. I was really interested. I found something called actually it was in a play that this came up, or a dance piece with Joe Fong and George Orange, and they were talking about the Dunning-Kruger effect. I don't know if you heard about this before.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what it is though.
Well, essentially they found that the more you know, the less you feel you know.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Which I felt going to do my yoga teacher training. So I remember going to my first class and being like, this is really hard, but I kind of love it. And then eventually, after a couple of weeks, I could probably teach this. That's just what happens naturally. Apparently, this is what they found in this effect. Is it's sort of like your confidence scale is up here when you start, and then it goes down like this the longer you do it. And then eventually it comes up a little bit again. But you have to know so much. It's almost like, oh gosh, I don't know enough. So then when I went to, I've been doing hot pod and classes and stuff, I was like, oh, I can do that vinyasa, no problemo. I could probably teach this stuff. Then going to India, I was lost. I was like, this is a vast amount of knowledge that I don't even know. Like, it's like a beach and I know this speck of sand.
Yeah.
And so I came home feeling like, oh, I couldn't possibly teach this because I haven't read the Vedas, which are like these huge ancient texts. But like, that's also something that happens is the more you know, the less you feel you know.
But like, I think I had that similar thing when I used to write papers in university and stuff, or my dissertation or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, this is going a bit dry, but I thought I'd really understood the literature surrounding unemployment practices and social class norms and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I thought, right, I know all the key authors.
I'll take a
I
stab.
know everyone's thing. And then I find some random theory that someone mentions in a book and realise there's dozens of articles about this one theory that I haven't put in. So what I do then, I just ignore that and I go, oh, I didn't even find that. Because otherwise you'd be there all day. And then you find a little string and then it just builds and like, oh my God, this is like going on forever.
Yes.
But I do think that, but I think, is it the 4 stages of competence? We've spoken about this before.
Yeah.
Maybe the better you get, the more you realise you don't know everything.
Yeah.
I equally have a friend, I won't say their name because I don't want to out this person, but this person went for a job in a radio station to be a Welsh newsreader or a Welsh kind of presenter. And this person thought they could get away with speaking Welsh and they can't really 100% speak Welsh.
So they said, oh yeah, I can speak Welsh.
Yes.
But I can't. So again, like Joey from Friends, when he said, I can speak French, and he's like, blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely. But that can get you so far until then you have to do a radio demo and you've got to speak Welsh and then you can't really hide. But at the same time, this specific friend, I have to admire their confidence.
I'd love to bottle that confidence.
I think it's equally, as mental as that is, I think there's something quite endearing and fun about it. Because at least it's going, oh, well, I had a go. At least I had a go.
At least I had a go.
At least I had a go.
Yeah, I didn't wait for it to be perfect.
Yeah.
I would pay good money to listen to that.
I have asked this person, I said, please, can you get the recording? It's in an archive somewhere. As another story, this is another kind of maybe, I don't know if this is to do with imposter syndrome. My friend Philippe Dumajan went to India and he was queuing up, and I've never been to India. We are going later on this year.
Yeah.
And he was queuing up for something, and he said in India the queuing system is non-existent. People just whatever. Yeah. But in this particular place there was a bit of a kind of queue. Yeah. So he was kind of waiting in line, and he's half Canadian, so he's quite polite. And he'd been in India for a while and he was waiting. And this dude who was significantly shorter than Philippe, just like cheekily went in front of him. And Philippe went, ugh, and picked him up and spun round and plonked him down. And the guy, instead of going like, mate, why you do that? He kind of went, ugh. And he just didn't care. He's like, oh, well, I had to go. And sometimes I think that playfulness with the imposter syndrome stuff of being found out, it doesn't always have to be, oh, I'm a fake, I'm going to lose my job, they'll never trust me again, oh my gosh. Maybe sometimes it's a bit of, oh, you know what, maybe I misjudged that, who knows?
That's hilarious. So that's what I love that as a metaphor for imposter syndrome. Is like, whoops.
Well, yeah.
I mean, yeah. And actually, maybe that's it. The more we kind of build up those little whoops and we see that they don't really hit, the more able we are to put ourselves out there. It's when we wait, isn't it? And we observe and we're like, oh, that person put themselves out there and that went terribly wrong. That person did that. Social media and, in the office, seeing, observe. Actually, you just need to put it into practice. So in a really practical term, one thing that I do with clients is I get them to draw 3 circles around one another. And in the middle is your comfort zone. The next circle is your stretch zone or growth zone. And then the last circle is your panic zone. And just writing down what sort of things are in those zones gives you a bit of awareness, because a lot of people, rather than going into the growth zone, they jump into the panic zone. And I think that's where imposter syndrome comes a lot of the time, where sometimes it can feel like, oh, this is a bit new for me, but I feel okay, is probably your growth zone. But when you're in this is a bit new for me and I'm absolutely terrified, I feel really unprepared, is sometimes an indicator of actually going back into the growth zone and doing the steps to take you towards the kind of big next level, isn't it? Because sometimes we can kind of jump a few levels and that's not very helpful for our growth either. So it can be a really good barometer, but that's a really good exercise to do if you're ever thinking, okay, how can I push myself or how can I not feel like an imposter? Mark out the steps. So it's like social media. Well, maybe a video is in my panic zone, but maybe just talking over a reel is in the stretch zone. Well, do that a couple of 100 times then do the video. Like, no one's forcing you to dive into that panic zone. I think that's where some people kind of like the Welsh on the radio. Yeah. That is, personally, I think that's the panic zone, isn't it? Of like, well, big, strong and wrong.
Yeah. But I kind of admire it. And I guess my kind of takeaway message would be something like, there's loads of things I could say about this, but I think maybe don't let the past, this sounds a bit kind of deep, don't let the past determine your future. And what I mean about that is that, say if you are the kind of person who has historically been quite uncomfortable with public speaking, or isn't the person who's the centre of attention, the entertainer, the joker, the confident one in school who used to do all the school plays, whatever. And I think some people have this story of all the times when they weren't that, but there's nothing wrong with changing that. And having that thing determining your future. And this is something I learned. I'm doing an acting class at the minute, and some people are finding it quite hard to go to certain emotional levels, and we're trying to unlearn that. Oh, I'm not someone who gets angry.
Oh, well, that's so true. Yeah.
What if this is your first time?
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to necessarily mean you have to be comfortable, but what if it's just you're exploring that new identity of yourself?
That's
and don't
really
worry, and people seeing you in that light. Like, I wasn't not working in media presenting my whole life. There was a time where I wasn't, and then I was. And that flip over was actually quite scary.
Yeah.
But I think everyone needs that, bit of a leap of faith sometimes to just close their eyes and maybe don't pretend you can speak Welsh and go on the radio.
Yeah.
I'm not saying do that, but there's nothing wrong with pushing yourself out your comfort zone.
And I think just touching on something you said there, just because it feels different doesn't mean it's wrong. And it's a little bit like, where these pianos, if you've been playing these notes, these 4 notes down here at one end of the piano, it doesn't mean that all of the piano isn't available to you. It's just that people are less used to hearing that. So it might take a little bit of adjustment from other people. I've forgotten about one of these things that is a trick that I do as well. If you're feeling like, to put myself out there, to be a little bit more outgoing or to speak up a little or interject or whatever, speak clearer. I've always been known as the shy one or whatever. A really good place to practice is a McDonald's or any drive-through, because they need you to be alert, assertive, clear, direct, all of those things. And so if you think that's the imposter version of you, put yourself into an environment where there are no stakes of people knowing you. You're never going to see them again, probably, at a drive-through, and you can really enjoy testing that part of the piano out and just kind of going, well, it's 30 seconds of ordering a McMuffin.
I know.
And then it's over, and then you get a Happy Meal or
absolutely
a Costa or whatever.
In uni, I was the one who's tasked with ordering the takeaway.
Oh, ordering the takeaway.
So
yeah,
sure. They'd go, oh, look, order the takeaway, and I get everyone's order. And instead of going off my room to do it, I'd almost be like performing. Oh, I just knocked the pop shield. I'd be performing the ordering of the takeaway to my housemates a bit, not that level, or being the one to sit in the front with the taxi drivers. That is a great one because you're not going to see them again. Taxi drivers are generally quite friendly people, and there's the stock phrases you can say, which I know they probably get bored of, but why not use that as a bit of a place where you can just, you know what, I'll jump in the front today, thank you very much,
and just flex.
So yeah, it's not always a bad thing, feeling like an imposter, if it's done in, a measured way, because it's a sign of growth, I think. So yeah.
If you feel like you're in that stretch zone, you're probably in the right place.
Yeah, as long as it's not a tear zone.
A tear zone?
Yeah, stretch, not tear.
Oh.
I just made that up now. You can have that if you want.
Let her rip.